Hey guys, Scott here. Thought I'd take a quick jaunt over in the asymmetrical horror field to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a game that I'm sure most of us have tried out at some point. I stopped playing the game about a week in because I realized that it was pretty shallow. Like the gameplay was very, there was not much to it. The skill ceiling for family was very low. It essentially just came down to map knowledge, and that was pretty much it. So it wasn't the game for me, but it was pretty fun playing it when I played it, and that was pretty much all I was expecting. I never really expected it to last very long based on the way that the devs created the game. It seemed like their intention was to make a game where you pretend you're in that scenario, and that's cool and all, but a game like that where you're forced to role play a certain way instead of being a player playing a video game, it's always doomed to fail. It's just not going to work because people will always start to try to optimize things. That's just how it works. That's the reason Dead by Daylight has actually succeeded for so long, because they started off in the exact same way, but then they realized, okay, people are not doing this anymore. They're now treating it like an arcade video game. We have to adapt to that. And they did. So that's why they're still living. And Texas Chainsaw is not doing so hot. In fact, it's doing terribly. It's losing about 40% of its player base each month. So if we keep this going for the rest of the year, they're going to be down to like 300, 400 average players at any given time, which is, as close that you can say as being a dead game. Now, I do have to admit that this is just PC. It is also on Game Pass, and I have no doubt there are definitely more players there. But the whole point to take into account with this is that this shows the trend. There's no reason to assume that the trend would be different on PC than it is on anywhere else. Obviously, the numbers will be different. The base numbers are going to be a lot smaller on PC and a lot bigger on Game Pass because it's free there. But the trend is still what matters. This is still indicative, roughly, of what the overall player base is doing, and there's simply no reason to assume that's not the case. So, we can gather from this that it's doing bad. In fact, it's doing worse than Friday the 13th did, which had, honestly, even half the players at the start. It only had 5,000 players at the start, and it maintained more players than Texas Chainsaw for pretty much an entire year before it started dropping off a lot. So it's even doing worse than their older game, which had numerous lawsuit issues, incredible amounts of bugs. I think the main reason Friday the 13th actually ended up having more players overall is because it was embraced more of a silly game, in my opinion. Just like running people over with cars and shit. It just led to like stupid moments that there was no real skill ceiling in that game either, but it didn't matter because it was just stupid and fun. Texas Chainsaw ends up, at least in my opinion when I was playing it, I just never got that same feeling. As Killer, I just sort of felt kind of stressed out the entire time. And when I was playing Victim, I always felt that it was just sort of, as long as you had a single competent teammate, it was pretty much free every time. Again, the game might have changed. I've not played it since a month or a week after it came out, but that's how the game released for me. So why is all of this happening? Why is it doing so badly? A lot of it comes down to the game itself is just not built to last. They did not make a game that is future-proofed at all. They made a game that they said in their interviews was designed to be played as if you were role-playing, you're in the game, you're in the movie itself. And that's cool for a little while, but then once people realize that you can optimize certain strategies, that just goes out the window, and developers have to accept that. If they don't, their game just will die because they're living in a fantasy world where they think that, everyone's going to play the game how they want to play it. People are going to play how they themselves want to play it, not how the devs want to play it. So that was one of the first crucial mistakes. Other than that, though, it's been basically, from what I've understood, I visit their Reddit maybe once every couple of weeks to see what's going on. It's a lack of support, a lack of feedback, and the developers, at least some of them, they just straight up act like children. They're just like the most immature devs I've ever seen in my life. And look, I will go out and say, I completely understand not sitting there and taking shit from people that have nothing of value to say. If you're a game developer and someone says, your game fucking sucks, fix your game, you stupid expletive, blah, 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 you fucking suck. That's not really criticism. You're allowed to defend yourself against that. Completely fine. But the problem is, a lot of the times, people will actually offer, like, good, actual detailed feedback, and these devs will just still make fun of them. And it's like, this is a really common thing. Like, I see this shit everywhere. In fact, every single top post this past week is just about how the devs are just shitting on people complaining about very real issues with the game. Like, every single one of them. It's just all... Honestly, it seems mostly this guy right here, but It's just, they're just not taking criticism well at all. And I think this is something that Behavior used to do really badly as well. If you try to say that they did something wrong, they would honestly act kind of like how McLean did in his one video where I was going over some changes. He felt like personally insulted. I think he mellowed out a lot about that more because it was nothing personal. But I do understand that. I understand where that comes from. When you have something that you worked on and you have people shitting on it, it's, yeah, that sucks. But if you are a game developer, you have to realize that these people are complaining about things because they want to keep playing your game. It's because they actually like your game. The worst thing that can happen is no one talks about your game. That's the absolute worst scenario. It's much better to have people complaining than no one talking at all. So yeah, it does suck when things you've personally worked on are getting, shit on by the community. I completely understand that. But you really got to handle it better than this. You can't just be a professional victim the entire time. Yes, some people will say completely unnecessary rude things to you, but if you are a game dev, you have to learn to take some of that shit on the chin. Some of it is actually criticism, some of it's horrible shit, but you can't get one guide either. This is something I've learned from Twitch too, and we all fall prey to this sometimes, so I will sympathize even with that. Getting one guide is 99% of people are like, hey, this is awesome, this is cool, this is great, but one guy is like, fuck you, this sucks, and then you just ignore everybody else, and you just focus on that one guy and attribute the entire community to that one guy being an asshole. And that, it seems like, is what these guys are doing, non-stop. Most of it is just not needless bitching. It's just like, hey, we don't like this change. This change is very, very silly. I don't think this is a good idea. And then they're just met with responses basically like children. And that just puts zero faith in your game devs. I'm sorry. I would have no faith in these guys whatsoever. They literally act like children sometimes. And again, I understand needing to defend yourself, but a lot of it is actually real criticism that they're just ignoring because, frankly, I just don't think they give a shit. It seems like they don't really care about future-proofing the game. This is another reason I quit. It seemed like there was no future plan for the game. It was not built to last. Friday the 13th was not really built to last, and none of them are lasting. So that's what's going on with this game. It seems like it's a combination of lack of game depth, very slow updates. The actual monetization system is super jank too. You got to spend $10 for a chance to play something new, so that can suck. And then because of that, the lobbies take forever to load. The dwindling player base makes the lobbies take even longer to load. The developers, some of them, I don't know most of them, honestly. The ones I see posting on social media, they act like absolute babies and children, which is just pathetic. And on top of all of that, it seems like most of the game's player base is reliant on Game Pass. And Game Pass doesn't last forever. They probably got about, 6 more months of Game Pass? Then what? If that's the only reason the game exists, that means this game has a 6-month lifespan before it straight up dies. Because by then, we're going to have 300 to 400 players on Steam if the trajectory holds, which I don't see why I wouldn't. I think that's starting to where you can call it a dead game. You can still find lobbies, but in a game where you have to have a specific role for a character, so even then you're going to have people dodging lobbies with only 300 average players at any given time, that's going to be dead as shit. So I don't see any way that this game comes back up, especially with the devs, unless they completely do a 180 on their attitude. But this is pretty much exactly what I thought would happen, and it's why I got out of the game so quickly, which seemed to be the correct decision. But it sucks to see that this is happening to another game in the genre that we love, and it's mostly due to the developers' stubbornness, I guess. So that's what's going on there. Anyway, thanks for watching.